My name is Kim Jackson, and I am an Episcopal priest. So I'm the Reverend Kim Jackson, and I currently live in Stone Mountain, Georgia, where I am serving as a pastor to a community of people who are experiencing homelessness. I'm also currently running for office. I'm running for the Georgia State Senate, District 41. One of the reasons why I'm running for office is that I think it's really important to bring someone who is theologically trained to the Capitol in order to counter some really terrible theology that is often being spoken from the well, right? Like people are standing up, senators, state senators are standing up in the well and spouting out really dangerous theologies, right? They have weaponized Christianity in order to oppress people, in order to keep gay people from adopting children. I don't think this conversation needs to happen in the well, quite frankly. Like, I think this is a conversation that we have over coffee or tea or your favorite beverage. And let's talk about other ways that we can interpret those scriptures. Let's talk about other ways that perhaps God is calling us to create community with one another. I grew up in South Carolina. I grew up in a small town called Cowpens, South Carolina. It is literally a one stoplight town in rural South Carolina. So I actually grew up Baptist in a very deeply religious household. I knew when I was 8 that I wanted to be a pastor, and I knew when I was 13 that I would run for office. Like, I had that really light bulb moment going as a 13-year-old to a city council meeting. Our first Black mayor had been elected, and so there was somebody up on the dais who looked like me, who was running things in this majority white city and really making positive change for a city. And so that was the light bulb moment where I knew I want to run for office. But I had no idea how these things would work together. My parents were both born in Appalachian in poverty. My dad's one of 10, my mom is one of 8. And their their accessibility to the American dream came through going to Berea College, which Berea College is for Appalachian children who are poor, right? The whole motto around how Berea functions is that they help lift kids out of poverty. And their goal is for your children not to qualify to go to Berea College. Like they want you to make enough money that your children don't qualify. My dad is a social worker. My mom is a nursing professor. And so I was really, I think, instilled in me that the next generation will be better than the last one. And certainly that has been true for me. I've been able to accomplish and advance and do a lot more than even my parents have been able to do. And I recognize that I am African American and that those advances are not stable in the same ways that they are for white communities, right? That oftentimes you will see one generation of African Americans who will achieve, and then that wealth is lost. That those steps are lost and cut back. I think when my parents raised me to think about the American dream was that we could do anything that we put our minds to doing, and that we would be okay, right? That we would have access to money and access to taking care of our family. And if my marriage is repealed, which is like also like whoever thought we would say that sentence, it makes me a whole lot less close to achieving the American dream that my parents instilled in me as something that was possible. We live a very comfortable life. My wife is in a PhD program, and we are like super educated Black women. And should we have children, we hope that for our kids too. And we recognize that that's not guaranteed. Being gay in the South is hard. Maybe being gay everywhere is hard. I don't know, but I know that being a Black queer woman in the South is hard. And 6 months of the year, nobody say anything to me about being gay. And then in the seventh month, somebody will spit at us while we're walking down the street holding hands with each other. Every time that we hear like negative statements about our marriage or about being queer, it's always shocking to me. I'm never expecting it. And it's always painful. When I received word that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died, I wept. And not just because of all that she's done for women and the advances that we've been able to make as women, but also because I realized that my marriage is at stake now. And my wife was really quick to say, no, the legality of our marriage is at stake, but our marriage is good. I mean, Trina and I got married. We had to elope to Iowa to get married because we lived in Georgia where marriage equality was not available to us. And we had to file our taxes separately for there were so many like weird, funky things that we had to do legally because our marriages were not recognized. My wife got really, really sick. We were legally married in Iowa, right? But was before marriage equality happened. And so, I take her to the ER, and the doctor says she needs to have surgery, and she wasn't able to sign for herself. And this is the first time anybody had asked, "Who are you?" to her. And I was like, "Well, she's my spouse." And they were just like, "Well, you need to get somebody here. Does she, are her parents alive? Like, who who is actually related to her?" I mean, that is a quote. Who is actually related to her that you can get to come in the event that we need to make some important decisions about her? And I'm like, but I'm married. I don't ever want to go back to that world where I have to call her younger brother, who's like a kid, essentially, to get permission, like for get him to give permission for them to do whatever to my wife, right? Like, and I think that's what's at risk, and that is what is scary. Tonight, the vast majority of us will go and we'll sleep in our beds and be sheltered. But my congregants, 90% of them sleep outside each night. When COVID happened, all of a sudden, it's like elected officials realized that homeless people existed. And it was a very strange thing for me because obviously people experiencing homelessness have been around pre-COVID. Everybody else went and sheltered in place. So all of the business people that you saw walking around downtown, like all of that, all of those folks disappeared. So all you could see when you went downtown were people who were experiencing homelessness. And so suddenly the city council was like having these real conversations about what do we do about homelessness. And um, so people who are experiencing homelessness had this amazing idea to go to the one place that is open 24 hours a day, and that is the Atlanta airport. So they would hop on the train in whatever way they could, right? And they would ride down. And so you would have 200, 300 people experiencing homelessness sleeping in the Atlanta airport. And that also, brought things home for folks. And they were just like, oh, we can't have that, right? Like we've got to figure out something to do with these folks. When we increase access to affordable housing, that's when we're starting to help people access the American dream. That's when we start helping to ensure that the next generation can be as good or better than the previous generation, right? Like that's the work. And as far as I'm concerned, that's also the work that God calls us to do. Jesus invited us to bring liberation to the captives, right? The call for healthcare reform, Jesus like went around and brought healing to people. Like literally, he's like, okay, we don't necessarily have a whole complicated healthcare system here, but I can do something here. And he brought healing to people, right? Like feeding the hungry, all those things. Those are the teaching. That's the teachings of Jesus. And those are progressive policies when they get put into action. And so that's who I am. And I think that fundamentally, when we live into those progressive policies, we actually help people reach the American dream. I've been wearing two hats in the midst of this kind of racial uprising. So I've served as a protest chaplain, which is basically, I wear my clergy garb or whatever, and I go with other faith leaders and have stood between police officers and protesters, like literally as a wall between those two. And and as a consequence of that, I've had to bear witness to and I've listened to the stories that regular citizens have of all of the ways that police have brutalized them and harassed them. Like I've listened to black mothers with their black boys standing beside them, yell at police officers and tell them about the times that they've pulled their sons over, about the time when they pulled their son's pants down, in the middle of the street, right? And my job and role in that place has been to make sure that people had a safe place to testify to those things, right? And because we're in the South, I think there is still respect for the clergy, and so for the most part, like police would just like listen and take it, because they couldn't respond any. They couldn't tell people to shut up or anything. They just had to hear it, and therefore I bore witness to that too. And I think, if anything, hearing those stories and being a pastoral presence, for me, it was about saying that, I want Atlanta citizens to be able to tell police about what has been done to them. For one thing, I think people don't believe them. So I wanted to make sure that was a space for them. But also, as a clergy person, I wanted people to know that God was present in that too. I wanted people to know that in the midst of those protests, with all of the guns, with all of the tension, that God was in the midst of that too. Simultaneously to that, like, I'd take off my clergy protest chaplain vest and I'd go and minister with people who are experiencing homelessness, most of whom are Black, right? Like, let's be clear. In Atlanta, I think 85% of the people who are experiencing homelessness are African American. And I would have to tell them, please don't go to the protest. Like, please don't go. Please don't go. And they're like, but you're going. But but if I got arrested, I'd be okay. If they got arrested, I wouldn't be able to find them because they don't have IDs. Like, who knows? Like, the bail fund wouldn't bail them out because they wouldn't know they existed, right? Like, there are all these added layers. And so, on one hand, I'm like at the protest and making sure that that's a space that people can bear witness to and be heard. And then on the other side, I've got Black men who are like ready to shout and scream Black Lives Matter and who want to be there. And I'm saying to them, like, guys, please don't go. Like, please don't go. And that was hard, but I think it was right. And we do have instances of people who are experiencing homelessness who got arrested during those protests, and they just kind of got swept up with everybody else, and their time in jail was extended, right? And so that tension of wanting to be with Black men who are experiencing homelessness, who really do have who really have a reason to be out there, because they have all the stories about the ways that police have harassed them, right? About the ways that police have come in and destroyed everything that they've owned. They have all the good reasons to go to protests, and at the same time it just wasn't safe for them, and I felt like I had a responsibility to tell them that. We've been having all these conversations about voting and why it's important that people who are experiencing homelessness still go and cast their ballots. And I had a gentleman who's been a congregant for many, many years who said to me, well, I can't vote because I have a felony that I'm still kind of working through. And he was like, but other people can do it for me. And for him, I think he was very clear, like, he probably can't access the true American dream anymore, but that other people, and when he was talking about other people, he was talking about other people who were experiencing homelessness, right? Like, he was looking at his brothers and sisters who were out on the streets and saying, like, they can do it for me, right? They can go to the polls, they can get new jobs, like, they can do things where they can live into the American dream. I've had these extensive conversations with people who are experiencing homelessness about the lottery, and like, that lottery ticket is literally for them their ticket to the American dream. And it's very fast. I keep saying to them, like, I don't understand, like, why are you buying a lottery ticket when you literally don't have anything to eat right now? And they're just like, but that's my ticket out, right? Like, if I win, all this goes away and I get to be okay. I think that's a false hope. Quite frankly, the odds are never in their favor for them to exit homelessness via a lottery ticket. But that is the thing that they dream about, right? That's the thing that they hope for. And so I try not to shatter those dreams. Somebody even said to me, and this is fascinating because I would have never thought about it in this way. But a woman said to me, Kim, when I had a house and a job and kids, when I was essentially living what the American dream is, it was very, very stressful. Like, I was always trying to figure out, like, do I have enough money to pay my bills? Like, how do I make sure all these things can happen so that I can keep my house, et cetera, et cetera. And she's just like, now I don't have any stress. Like, And I said, really? And she's like, no, like, I don't have to worry. I don't have any bills to pay. Right. I don't have to get up and on time to go to a job anymore. Like, this is the most free that I've been in a long time. And I found that just fascinating. She's a white woman, I think, who really was caught kind of in the rat race of trying to have it all. And when it all fell apart for her, I think she's made meaning out of that falling apart by saying, this is where I find freedom. We made the decision after the second Sunday in March to follow the law and no longer have gatherings of more than 50 people. And we understood that providing lunch is an essential service. And so we continue from day on. We've never missed a Sunday to meet at 1 o'clock in the park and serve lunch. And now, instead of having worship, me and my staff members, we just kind of spread out and we have these one-on-one conversations. And in some ways, I'm like hesitant to say this on camera, but in some ways it feels more like church because we get to have these one-on-one intimate conversations and we're not time bound, right? Like, we're not like, oh my gosh, it's almost time to start worship service, so let's get that together. But instead, we get to talk to people. And I can't tell you how many people we've actually gotten into rehab over the last couple of months. And it's because we could have a dedicated 30-minute conversation with someone, right? How many people have actually gotten referrals to Mercy Care to get the medical treatment that they needed, because they lift up their pants legs and you can see that their, legs are swollen and huge. And so it's actually been, as I think, as a faith leader, like, worship is central and core, and it's something that I really value. And I have found that having that one-on-one pastoral conversations with people is exactly what my community needs right now. And we're able to provide that for them in really important ways. The second Sunday in March, we had our last service in the park and we distributed lunches. We always bring about 80 lunches, and there were 150 people there. And so we didn't have enough lunches, and they took their meals and like spread them apart, and gave somebody an orange and somebody else got some chips, and like they made it so that every one of those people had food to eat on that day. And they said to me, this is what we've been doing all week long, is that there's not enough food right now, and so we just share it with each other. And we believe that that's what we are supposed to do so each other can survive. And so, in many ways, when I think about homelessness being addressed, I think that the people who are going to actually solve it are the people who are living on the streets themselves, right? Like, they are incredibly resilient and compassionate, and they share in ways that, quite frankly, I don't think people who have houses believe in sharing in the same ways, right? The poorest of the poor among us, those people who are sleeping on the streets, they will tell you time and time again. Quite frankly, they probably have more faith than I do. Like, they will tell you over and over again, God is in control. All things are possible with God. And they're not just saying that, they believe it. If you live on the streets, you spend a lot of time walking, and your feet are often exposed to rain. And so the conditions of your feet can be really terrible. And so we ran a non-medical foot clinic every week. And at one point in the process, we had gotten to the point where half of the people who were working at the foot clinic were people who had been previously homeless. And the other half of us were, people who'd never been homeless. But there was this balance where, people, and I would listen to the stories. This is the high point, so I would listen to Jennifer, who was homeless. She was homeless for 20 years. And she'll tell you the story. Like, she was addicted to drugs for like the first 5 years, but she got clean. She was clean and sober for 15 years and was still homeless for the remainder of that time. And so I listened to her, like, doing people's feet, and she's, scrubbing their feet, and she's talking to them. And I hear her tell that story of how she got free of drugs and alcohol. And then I hear her tell the story about how she finally found housing. And I can talk all day long to people who are experiencing homelessness about, like, here are some steps, like, we can get you out of this. Like, we can help you make the path, there's a pathway to being housed. I can do that all day long, but it is nothing like having a Jennifer who is holding somebody's feet and massaging them as she tells her story of liberation. That is such a symbol of hope for me of what is possible.